Hey friends, welcome back to the Accomplishment Project. Today's episode is part of our Accomplishment Tracker series, where we follow someone's real life journey toward a big goal, watching in real time as they navigate the ups, the downs, and the in betweens of meaningful accomplishment. My guest today is Fawn Arnold, a singer, actress, and entrepreneur whose career has spanned stage and education across Germany's musical theater scene. After performing in acclaimed productions like Les Mis, Dance of the Vampires, and Mamma Mia, Fawn built one of the first online singing schools in the German-speaking world, and I hope I get this right, Singen ohne Angst, helping singers find their authentic, confident voices. Now she's stepping onto a new kind of stage, quite literally, as she transitions into the world of public speaking with her new company, Next Stage. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to reinvent yourself after success, the courage it takes to start fresh, and how awareness and preparation can turn fear into forward momentum. Let's dive in to stepping on to the next stage with Fawn Arnold. Fawn, I'm so glad you're here. And let's talk a little bit about how we met.
You're my teacher.
I'm a teacher.
You're my teacher in the Science of People course that I am enrolled in since January 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And you help me with all my skills so that I can practice them better and I can stay accountable and everything. And yay, that's how I know you.
Yes. And we thank Vanessa Van Edwards, who is an amazing human being, for having People School as her flagship course. And this is where we met. I feel like we're kindred spirits, A, because we've got color in our hair, B, we both love to sing. And we've had a lot of great times chatting. And what's so amazing is that Fawn is my first subject who's willing to be tracked on their goal progress. So I'm going to have Fawn talk a little bit through her career path in just a second, but she's trying a very new adventure. And so here at the Accomplishment Project, we get to watch her grow, and she'll be a multi episode returning podcast guest, because we get to check in and live through this goal that she has. So, Fawn, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you and your background and what's led you to today?
Well, I am a performing artist. I'm a musical actress most of the time, but I also sing a lot of rock and a lot of metal. And I do opera. And I started out being a dancer because I used to couldn't sing. So I was like, I'll just dance. And but dancing is really like, until this day, if I sing a song, I imagine choreography to it because I just love dancing. It's, my thing. But I broke my back when I was 21. When I was dancing, I was on tour dancing and I broke my back. And so at that time, I was taking voice lessons from a teacher in Hamburg, Germany, an American. And I came to her and I said, I broke my back and I can't be on stage anymore. And I was crying. And she was like, well, then you'll just sing. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And because she was so nice to me at that time, because I didn't have a job after I broke my back, I stopped dancing immediately. I had to. She was teaching me for a really good price. And so I vowed, when I make it big, I'm going to teach as well. So I was working in a musical with Roman Polanski. It was a musical version of Dance of the Vampires, and he was my director. And one of the dancers came into my dressing room. Fawn, can I ask you a question? And I was like, okay. And she was like, I'm trying to transition from being a dancer into being a singer. And I was wondering if you could help me. And I'm like, I know how to do that. I've done that. So I started teaching her, and it was so much fun. And then I kind of realized, oh gosh, I think I like teaching more than performing. Yeah. And so I kind of did a career pivot there. And now I have my own online vocal school here in Germany. I do teach live and online and courses, and I have my own app and my own platform. I've just built a huge thing, and it's so much fun. I have over 200 voice students. Yeah, and I'm teaching my own method. I've developed my own singing method now. I work together with ears, nose, and throat doctors and with speech therapists. And I also teach coach as my method. And I have a team of 8 people that work for me in my school. Yeah. And so here I am. And I decided to start doing public speaking because I feel like in Germany it's really needed, the topic that I speak about.
I was going to ask you, why public speaking, but you kind of answered it. It's just this idea that it allows you to expand your ability to educate, which is where you realize that you loved doing that for people, and now you can kind of bring this to bigger stages.
Well, it's so interesting because it's combining me being on stage and also teaching. So it's like the best of both worlds.
There's like a performance aspect there.
Definitely.
So that is awesome. I know you have a public speaking opportunity that's coming up, which we'll talk about, but did the public speaking opportunity come up and then you realized, oh, I kind of want to do this? Or is it the other way around where you're like, I think I want to do this, and then you started looking for the opportunity?
Well, I've been interested in public speaking for a long time. Like, I think the
Okay.
first TED talk that I saw was Brene Brown. I didn't even know that there was anything like TED until that. And then a really good friend of mine, my dance captain from Mamma Mia, I did Mamma Mia in Stuttgart, he was doing the exact same thing. And so we would get together and do little accountability meetings and talk about what tools we were using and everything. And he did a TEDx talk in Stuttgart. And I thought it was amazing. It was about creativity. Jonathan Tilley, if you want to look up his TEDx talk. So then when I went to this People School event last March and I met Vanessa personally, she made everybody say, what are your goals and what are your action steps in the next 30 days? And at the end, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and this step. And once I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I usually do it. That's why accountability calls are very, very important for me as a very important tool. Because if I've told somebody I'm going to do it and they ask me, did you do it? And I'm like, no, then I really feel stupid. So,
Oh.
it keeps me on my toes, which it does a lot of people. So, yeah.
So let me just backtrack just a little bit because I'm curious. The TEDx talk that your friend did,
Mm-hmm.
how long ago was that?
It was probably in about 2013.
2013. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you just joined Science of People in January and then had this conversation with Vanessa in March. And
Right.
so, in that, I guess, 12 years, um, was there anything that was happening on the speaking front? Was it just an idea that was like, oh, I want to, but
Well, I do hold vocal workshops, and in my school, I go live at about 3 to 5 times a week, and I explain stuff. And I actually speak more than I sing. Of course, I'll demonstrate some of the exercises, or if somebody has a question, I will demonstrate it. So I am speaking.
for
So
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so you've already been practicing it, but actually putting it to something on stage, just a little bit of a different format, right? This is
Hmm.
almost kind of like a keynote style speaking stage type of thing that you are aspiring to add to your repertoire now.
Exactly.
So you made a decision in March. Now, at the time that we're recording this is September. You're like, I'm doing this. Okay, so
Hmm.
walk me through what happened between March and when we maybe even decided that we were going to have this conversation for the podcast.
So my school in German is called Singen ohne Angst, which means singing without fear, directly translating. And so I also studied at a sports academy to learn how athletes prepare mentally for their sporting events because I wanted to learn more psychology of getting over stage fright. But I felt like preparing for a performance is like preparing for a sporting event. If you're an athlete, you have to be disciplined, you have to practice. And so I did that in 2018 and I got my license to be a sport mental trainer is what it's called. Sportmentaltrainer in German. And so that is what I've been teaching my vocal students because I found out that when you are scared, it affects your voice incredibly. So having the mindset of being self-confident and knowing you can do something is a practice. Doing this mindset training got me also into speaking about the mindset training. I get invited to speak at entrepreneur events, especially for women. And I will just go there and do my mental training mindset spiel, right? But I never really had like a plan where I said, this is what I'm going to be speaking about. This is my topic. And so that's what changed between March and September, that I sat down and I said, I want to have a plan about what I'm speaking about. And so that's what I did. I got on my chat GPT and got my AI and started developing topics because I wanted to speak to people in these kind of positions that are making changes right now in the world. And I think it's more prominent and more important than ever to make sure that these people who have good ideas and really want to help people, that they are able to communicate that the best way possible without being afraid.
So then this is a more specific type of stage speaking where you are presenting an idea and a topic, and it takes a little bit more than just, let me just stand up there and,
Wing
say a
it.
few things. Exactly.
Right.
Which is my favorite type of speaking, but
Yes, it's so
you know,
free, but
it's a little bit
but
more structured, like the TEDx's of the world, or things that are a little bit more curated, and have a presentation piece to them. So they have to be rehearsed, they have to be refined. There's all of the visuals and the way that you command the stage, the nonverbals, the emphasis of the vocal tone. There's so many things that go into this, and this is all things that we learn in people school. So I think that was one of the tools that you took on to start making this transition. But I know at the time that we talked last, you had a speaking gig already lined up. So tell me about the speaking gig. Who are you speaking to? Who's in the audience? What is your topic?
well, so what I did is when I got back in March, I figured out my topic and I did a lot of research about performance and trust. So it's about being able to positively influence people. I'm trying to translate this. It's called My Secret Weapon in German, Mein geheime Superkraft, my secret superpower, how you can show positive influence even in serious situations. I know that sounds like a weird title, but I'm just translating it directly from German. In German, it sounds a lot better. Dein geheime Superkraft, wie du im Ernstfall Wirkung zeigst.
I love it.
So
I'm glad that you said it in German because that was what I was in my mind. I'm like, please say
yeah.
it.
So, and the word for influence is Wirkung, and that comes from the word work. So, and I think that's a really cool translation for the word influence because it's not just about like manipulating somebody, it's also about working with somebody. So, people that I'm going to be speaking to. My husband works for a catastrophe relief program called the THW, and he does it voluntarily. And he told me about a couple of conventions that are coming up. So I wrote a letter or an email to some of these people that were organizing this convention. And one of them came back and said that he would be very interested in my topic. So he gave me two slots. He gave me one on Wednesday and one on Thursday. And it's going to be a speech with a workshop. So that makes it way easier for me because I'm way better at teaching than speaking, especially in German. And he said, how many people do you want to have? And I said, just like a maximum of 30. So it's going to be great and kind of still small. I like small things where I can get intimate and where I can get hands on and roll up my sleeves and get together and teach people things. So I'm speaking about the topic. And I'm also have like a workbook, and they're going to be answering some little worksheet questions, and they have to get up and do an exercise and all of this stuff. It's a total different audience than I'm used to because it's probably going to be mostly men. And when I'm teaching singing, it's mostly women. And also, they're not going to be artists at all, which is going to be interesting for me to see how to deal with that. And I do have to say that Germans are all about performance. They're all about performance. And what we know it from people school as competence, they're all about that. For them, it's more important to be right than to be kind. For them, it's more important to be competent than to be friendly. And they just don't know that the trust part of being a leader or being in a position where you have to help people in traumatic situations is the warmth part. And so I went and did some research about the Navy SEALs, and it's just amazing what I found out about the recruiting process. And so I'm going to use that because I think that that would be better if I did it from that point of view instead of doing it from an artsy point of view, which I usually am used to doing. So I've gone down this totally different path, got completely out of my comfort zone.
So this is really interesting because I feel like it's stretching you in a way because you're talking to people that aren't who you normally have interacted with in the past. And so it sounds like you have to do a little more extra digging to connect to that audience in a different way, but to still have a message that can stretch through different audiences, right?
Right. It's really not that much different than any other process of performance and trust. But I really think that the results of what came out about the study for the Navy SEALs is what the point is. And that's what's very shocking, especially living in a country where people are more about the performance or about the competence side of things, more than they even are about being kind to people and smiling at people. It's really important work for me because Germany is really a great country and they're very innovative and they have a lot of great ideas, but I feel like a lot of it gets stopped because of this lack of being able to build trust, which comes from what you and I both know is warmth.
Yeah, and that must be super exciting because then we can take that and inject that into culture. And maybe it might not, move the needle right now, but putting yourself out there, that could be just a way to warm things up over there in Germany. So, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about too, you were talking about how you were burning the candle at both ends. So it sounds like you've been pretty busy. So I'm really curious to hear about what you've been doing to plan and prepare. How have you been juggling that with your personal life, your current work? Tell me a little bit about that.
Right. Well, I do run a school with 200 students, and I have a team of 8 people that I have to coordinate and everything. I do have a lot of help. But just during the summer, it's a big deal because we're getting ready for the new year. We also have a big live graduation party here at my house. I have a big backyard, so about 100 people come, and I have to prepare for that. It's also the first time because I always have a big team meeting once a year where my team is here. Thank God, my house is wonderful, where they can spend the night here, where we can really get into the nitty gritty of what we're going to do next year. And we do like team events together and stuff like that. And then after that big graduation party, a girlfriend of mine from Las Vegas came to visit, and that's been planned for like almost a year. It was her first time to Europe. And so I wanted to show her things. And it actually kind of got me out of my head, I must say, but I was still having to have my speech like memorized. So my goal was to have it memorized so that when I'm doing all of this stuff with getting ready for my all of my events that were happening, in between I could, like when I'm walking the dogs, I could just go through my stuff in my head and keep that memorized. And that was such a good decision because if I'd have started memorizing after my friend left, I wouldn't have made it because in the between I got this little other speaking gig. And so I would have had to say, no, I can't do it. And I hate to do that. I'm somebody that really, I dive into cold water because I think if it's not now, then never. So as you can imagine, preparing for the school, preparing for the events. I'm also taking a YouTube masterclass right now because YouTube has changed a lot and YouTube is my medium of communication. And so that's on top of that. That was all this stuff that came up before I knew that I was having the speaking gig. So you still have to kind of do that too, right? So it was really a lot. And I am somebody who kind of worries a lot. So it's, yeah, it's kind of like major meditation sessions so that I get out of my head and can sleep and stuff like that.
Okay, so remind me, when did you secure this speaking gig?
Probably the end of June.
Okay, so you had basically like June and July, or I guess July to
Yeah.
prepare. And then August is when all the crazy stuff happened. And now
Yeah.
we're in mid September and you have 1 week left, right?
Right. So yeah, I know. So my girlfriend left on the 5th of September.
Okay. And I want you to speak about this additional speaking gig because I was like, oh, yeah, we're going to get in right before your very first speaking gig. And then, then it's like last Friday, it's like, I did my first one.
I know, but it was tiny. It was like 8 people. I was speaking to a friend of mine. I was telling her because she was like, well, what's going on? I said, I've got my first speaking gig. And then somebody that I didn't know was asking about that topic. And he said, well, you know what? I am a volunteer in the Black Forest Rescue. And I think this group would be really interested in that. So he was like, would you like to do it? And I was like, sure, of course, because like I said, I always say yes. And he was like, would you like to do it on the 12th? And I was like, sure. And he like literally got back to me that same day. And I was really, really terrified because I'm a perfectionist. But I'm so glad that I did it because it helped me so much. And it makes me even more prepared for this bigger gig, which I'm hoping to get more gigs from.
So, did you do the same exact topic that you're planning on doing next week? So, this is
Yes,
almost in essence practice for next week.
right. It is.
That's great. I mean, to
I
even
know.
have an audience, even if it was 8 people, it's just one rep, right?
I know. It was the Black Forest Rescue. There's like the same kind of group of people, right? And the fun thing is, I got like a workbook printed up and I did all of that before the chaos started in August. So I always try to be like prepared early because you just never know what's going to happen. And I think that if I didn't have all that chaos going on in August, I probably wouldn't have been prepared already. I would have said, oh, I've got time. I'll do it in August or whatever. You know, the little procrastination devil that comes and sits on our shoulder. But because of that extra step that I knew it was coming up, I said, okay, I've got to be ready because afterwards I'm just going to have to polish it. And that's all the time I have for. And that was great because I was able to polish it actually with a live audience for the Black Forest Mountain Rescue. And it went really, really well. So
That's so awesome. I'm so glad that you got some extra practice. I want to ask a couple questions about your preparation because I'm sure there's a bunch of people listening who might be like, I want to do that too, and want to give them some advice or just some strategies. And I always talk about how, everybody's got their own path, but if you are given the opportunity to see what is possible, then that might help you just maybe even a little bit make a decision on how your path is going to go. So I would love for you to share what things are you doing to prepare? How are you practicing? And what tools did you have at your disposal that have been super helpful? And how would you recommend people to go down that same path?
well, I mean, I have to say that People School has helped me so much because Vanessa has a little bonus thing called powerful presentations. And so that's helped me so much to help me structure everything how I would like to present it. I do have to say that's been like my main tool that I've used simply because I didn't have that much time to prepare. But I was so glad that I had that. For my research, I did a lot of Google research for the Navy SEALs. Simon Sinek as well. He has also a piece about the Navy SEALs that I've looked at and got inspired by. I have my introduction, I have my goal, I have a little story that I tell, and then we get into the workshop, the quiz questions, and then we go into the physical part, and then you have your Schlussworte or your ending. I do have to say, after I did the mountain rescue gig, I changed it a little bit because it didn't work. I realized it didn't work as good. But for me, the most important thing was to practice in front of people. So when my team got here in August, I was like, do you guys have 5 minutes just to hear my introduction? And then when I would meet somebody else, my neighbors, and I would be like, do you have a little bit of time? I just want to show you how I'm ending my speech. And then they all sat down and I just did the ending because I didn't want to practice and have them sitting there for a whole hour, but I had to practice these little snippets. So, and then when I would walk with my dogs, I'm just talking and looking at the trees as if they're people or looking at my dogs as if they're people and practicing all the time, speaking out and not reading and not in your own four walls, going somewhere where you get distracted. So the thing is to prepare for mistakes because they're going to happen. And my major, most important tool is I have a mindset coach and his name is Dominic. I'm a worrier. And so I stay up at nights worrying. And I said, how am I going to get over this? And he said, well, what's your major problem? And I said, well, I just want to communicate everything so well that I can help these people. And he said, well, that's your problem. Stop wanting to do that. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, every time you do a speech, every time you do anything, make it about you learning from it. And that helped me so much because it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I just see it as a learning process instead of trying to be perfect, then it takes all of that pressure off of me. Yeah, and Dominic gave me a little meditation that I do in order to get over this perfectionism that when you're a performing artist and you are in these huge international musicals, you kind of do have to be perfect. Otherwise, you're going to get notes from Roman Polanski that's saying, this wasn't good or whatever, and you don't want that, right? So no pressure. So that was kind of in my DNA, and that was blocking me so much. But if I just go to every speaking gig and think, okay, what am I going to learn today while I'm doing this gig? Instead of saying, I've got to be perfect and I can't forget that, blah, 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 that's just doesn't help. So he was a major tool for me as well. So I would suggest if anybody's having things like that, doesn't know how to get over it, you can say that it's blocking, find somebody that'll coach you.
That's all so good. Oh my gosh, all the practicing and just being comfortable with the mistakes.
Mm,
That's always something. I think that this is why I am scared of doing stage speaking, because
yeah.
I want to practice it in my head and I just want to blurt it out and I just want to wing it.
Well, the thing that I'm always worried about is because German is not my mother language. And so I do make a lot of mistakes because the grammatic part of German, they have all of these articles that change depending on if it's dative or genitive or whatever. But it's still, my mother language is English. That puts a lot of pressure on me too. But Dominique, my mindset coach, he's like, they're going to hear that you're a foreigner. And he said, and even put it in your speech.
And it's so interesting how these mindset shifts, it's like getting in your own head as you're going through the process. I think a lot of times we judge ourselves so harshly, especially if we're you know, perfectionists and
Definitely,
wanting
definitely.
everything to be, and I mean, I think that that's a good thing. When you want everything to go so well, that means you care, right? It's just making sure you don't cross that line where it's starting to debilitate you. Having somebody outside of you is sometimes super helpful to be like, you're fine. You're doing great. Don't worry as much as you need to. Is there anything that's going on right now in your mind that either feels fuzzy or overwhelming or that you're concerned about? Because, you're starting to be in that home stretch.
Well, I have introverted tendencies. On days where I can't people because I'm introverted, it's really, really hard. Like it's really hard. So I get worried about that because I don't know when that's going to happen. And so if have a day where I'm being introverted, Fawn, what am I going to do? And Dominique just said, don't worry about that. And he said, put that in as part of your speech. Teaching these people as well that I'm a musical actress who stands on international stages and I'm an introvert. They're gonna be like, what? And then if something weird happens, I can say, oh, that's just the introverted me that's coming through or whatever. You know what I mean? Also, being in an area with people who show more competence than warmth, or they want to perform more than show trust, maybe on the introverted days, I would be showing them more competence instead of all that warmy, fuzzy stuff, which was also something positive. So again, Dominique showed me that some of these things that I'm worried about could also be to my benefit, you know?
Yeah. And I think, too, just because I also have a job where talking is very demanding of the time,
Important.
and yeah, and
Yeah.
it's super important. I
Yeah.
think there is a energy management game we have to play when we're talking a lot. I always talk about how before I started working at Science of People and having all of these calls, yes, all of my work was talk, but I also had more time to do other things where I wasn't talking. But talking
Right.
is draining. And especially when you're singing too, singing can be draining. It's all just energy coming from the voice, and it's using your breath. It's just a little bit more exhausting. And so making sure that you are preserving your energy in the right way, but also making sure that you're able to show up in those times. Definitely a little bit more needed in that.
Right. You have to kind of turn on. You're in front of the camera, then all eyes are on you, and being on is draining. It really is. And you have to have down days, and my girlfriend Claudia was here, and it did so good to get me out of my head with her. Like, I would get up in the morning and I'd do, I exercise, and then I would walk the dogs in the orchards, and I would do my speech, and then would come home and we would like eat breakfast or whatever. And then we would go do an activity for the day. And it helped me so much to do that because I wasn't thinking the whole day about all the stuff I had to do and about I need to do this and I haven't done this or whatever. It got me out of my head. We would go to a castle, or we would go to the Black Forest and go hiking, or I took her because we live close to France. We went to Strasbourg, and yeah, it was just, we had so much fun. There's a famous horse racing week in the neighboring town. And so, and everybody, wears their fascinators and everything. And we wore our cowboy stuff because she's from Texas too. We went to high school together, and then I moved to Las Vegas and she lived there too. So we got back in touch, and we've been friends for ages now. And so I said, bring your cowboy stuff. We're going to show them how it's done at the races. And we wore our cowboy hats and our cowboy boots and went to the races and had so much fun. So even though I was like thinking, oh God, this is really bad timing sometimes, when she was there, I was so glad because it really helped me like rejuve and get some new energy, right? Because I wasn't thinking about my school. I wasn't thinking about my students. I wasn't thinking about the speaking gig. I was there in the moment, just being with Claudia and having fun and showing her all these wonderful places where I live. So,
It's almost like enforced self-care, right? In a way.
right, right.
Okay, so you've got 1 week and then it's over. I'm assuming there's going to be a little bit of self-care in there, but I really want to think about what happens next after that. What is on your game plan?
Right. Well, so I kind of just thought about this like last week, because at this little mini gig that I did, they were like, "Oh, well, I would like for you to come and talk to my school. We're having problems with parent teacher, whatever, and maybe that could help them. How do I get in touch with you?" And I was like, oh, yeah, I've got to be in touch with, you know? So I had to print up new business cards because all of my business cards are either about me singing, the singing business cards, and then I've got the singing on angst, my school business cards, and I didn't have anything about speaking, and I can't give them the same one. That just, I don't want to do that. That's not professional. So I had to do new business cards, and then I was like, gosh, I don't have any kind of social media or anything because I just really jumped into this. I didn't think I was going to get a gig this fast, to tell you the truth. I wrote these letters and I thought nobody's going to like say, come and be at our convention, because there was no way to look me up. They could only look me up as a singer and not as a speaker. So I kind of like did a LinkedIn thing. It's really bad. I've got to work on that. But it's about just getting it out there first, right? And so I have a website about my school, and then I have a website called fawnarnold.com, which combined me as a singer, that you can book me as a singer and also as the school. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to completely change fawnarnold.com and make it only about speaking. And that's what I did. That's what I did last weekend. That was my weekend. So I did that really fast, and I hate WordPress. I use something else, and WordPress is really hard. And I'm so proud of myself. I did it. I did it. My husband only had to help me twice, and it's responsive and everything. It's just like a one pager, and it's real, but it's just something that's out there in case somebody wants to look me up afterwards. I also got a little landing page ready and made a little QR code, so at the networking event, I can show them my QR code and everything, and it'll lead them to a little questionnaire where they can leave their email address and stuff like that, so that I can give them information and tips and whatever. I still don't have like a newsletter prepared at all, but I'm like, who cares? Just get them in there. Just start collecting, capturing, leads and everything. And so, because otherwise I would be doing all of this work at these speaking gigs and nothing would come out of it if I didn't have any way for people to get in touch with me, or anything that didn't look at least semi-professional, so that they could book me again or book me for something else. So I'm hoping that that will happen. And otherwise, my goal for the next half year is to get another topic so that it's not so Navy SEAL like. you know, or find something that maybe is like the Navy SEALs, but I could switch that part out depending on if I'm just working with normal people and not with civil protection, catastrophe relief people. and switch that out. So that's my goal. And then I could maybe offer um, like different trainings. So that's like my next step is getting more serious about exactly what I'm going to offer, exactly who I want to offer it to, finding your ideal customer, basically. Yeah. And so it's basically about me writing emails to people again saying, hi, you don't know I exist because I don't anywhere in social media until now with this topic. But maybe I saw that you have a convention coming up. I was wondering if you have a slot to speak and stuff. And I also need to figure out my pricing. So right now I'm just kind of like, we pay this. I'm like, okay, because I'm just happy to be doing it right now because I need the experience, but I need to kind of figure that out because I don't want to, be doing it for free. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's all very important. But I'm just really new at this kind of stuff, and so I've got to just kind of talk to other people. What do you charge? And what did you charge to start with, and stuff like that. But yeah.
You know what I like about this? I feel like maybe some of the logical, you know, progressions would be to maybe do, find your ideal customer first and then like, no, 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 this is not bad because and this is just proving my point that, you can kind of do it at your own pace, right? I mean, I know that there's people who are out there that speak that like they just were asked to do a speaking gig and then they're like, oh, okay, now I have to figure out all the other pieces first. And so that sounds to me like that's kind of what you're doing. You knew that you had this vision and you've been thinking about it for a really long time. So it's not like just like willy nilly, oh, I'm going to do a speaking and then I'm going to try to put together everything. You actually had the opportunity to practice something. And now you're using that experience to refine what you're going to do next, which I love. Because sometimes, especially for people who are like, well, I just want to get all my ducks in a row and I just, you might be preparing for something and then you have your first experience and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I don't know if that's really what I want. So to be able to give yourself those little steps along the way is a great alternative way of doing things. Like you don't have to have everything figured out. It took me a year to put out this podcast and I did go through the who's my ideal client? How am I going to structure this? But I also know that things may change as I go.
Well, of
This
course, and
was
I hope they do. That's always exciting then, if everything just stays the same, then who wants that, right?
Exactly. And there's also just the idea of, having enough flexibility to be able to just be open. And so I just love that, now after this is going to be over. So do you have any other asks or messages out to other organizations that have speaking opportunities for you? Or is it almost like, okay, when this is over, then it's like full slate cleanup?
Yeah, not right now. I just haven't had any time to even get myself out there any more than that. And plus, I'm just been focusing on that. But I do have a name for my business my new company that I want to start, and it's called Next Stage.
Ooh, next
Isn't that
stage. I
good?
love it. I do love it.
Because it's like it is my next stage in life, and it can also be the next stage of somebody else's life. So, and it's still a stage for me because I am on stage, but it's the next one. So I thought it would good, and I'm going to keep it in English. I think the people will understand it here, and if not, they can Google it. So
Yes. Give them that curiosity. Okay, so it looks like, after the gig, I can't wait to hear about it. We are obviously going to meet again for a second episode to kind of just see how you're feeling. I want to hear about the journey. I'd love to even hear about some of this back end stuff. What are you trying to do to prepare? How are things working on the website, social media, putting yourself out there? Because this is the stuff that people don't see. Right.
exactly, yeah.
And people need to know that, even if it's just like, hey, I'm doing a gig and hey, I'm doing a gig, that might be the surface level information that you see. What is all
Hmm.
the stuff that's working around in the background? But before you go, so I know that you are still working on figuring out how you will present yourself in social media and the interwebs and everything. But
Yeah.
I want to give people an opportunity to follow you now and just see if you have any steps in the journey. So, where can I send people? Where would you prefer that we send people from this episode?
Well, I would say go to my website, fawnarnold.com.
Mhm.
That's the best place if you are interested in my speaking stuff. Otherwise, I have Instagram. It's called, Belt Like a Pro,
Yeah.
and it's all about belt singing, and it's on Instagram if somebody wants to follow me there, but that's just only about belt singing. And then I have most of my social media, my Facebook followers and my YouTube followers and my Instagram followers are quite big in Germany under Singen ohne Angst, but that's mostly in German. But my English stuff is beltlikeapro.com and fawnarnold.com for the speaking stuff. So, yeah,
Perfect. We'll just put all of them just so that if you are just enamored with Fawn the way I am, I'm just going to click through and just be like, what's happening? And you get to watch the transformation because this is all the beginning. And this is what
right.
I love about this type of series because we're going through it with you. And it's not always the stuff that people see. So I love it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you
So,
so much for inviting me because I think it's just really important. The reason why I wanted to be a teacher anyway is because I make tons of mistakes and I love to let people learn from my mistakes. So, this also gives me the chance to kind of show people what worked for me, what doesn't work for me. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And you know what? I don't know why, but I think people love seeing the mistakes. Not because it's like, haha, you made a mistake, but it's a learning process, not just for you, but for all of us.
well,
Right?
also because in this day and age, people only show themselves pretty much perfect, with the reels and the stories. And it's like 10 seconds of somebody's day that's perfect and the rest maybe wasn't. So seeing somebody's mistakes also shows you they're human. And that would probably happen to me too. And it's not a bad thing, like Brene Brown, we're coming back full circle. Uh, be vulnerable. And yeah. So, my mistake that I had for my very first gig when we were about talking about mistakes is that I spoke too quickly. But the topic came over really well. And I was surprised at how many aha moments there were. And then after mine was over, we all sat there in the basement and had a drink. And then I said, well, could you guys give me some feedback to what I need to do better? And one of the things is that I speak too quickly. So I've got to learn to slow down. It also shows more competence if you slow down and you have pauses in your speaking. And also when I was reading, this is so funny because I practiced all of these different little blocks, but I didn't practice the part about reading the questions because I'm like, oh, I can read those. And that's not that important right now. I like read them maybe to myself out loud, like maybe twice. And so they said that I was laughing at some of the answers that were wrong, that they knew immediately through me smiling or reacting which answers were wrong and which answers were right. And so I need to be careful about that. And I would be like, that wanted them to show their hands to see which answer they thought was right. And I would always raise my hand on the right question, on the right answer. So they caught that and they were like, you can't do that. You've got to be really, really stoic. So those were my mistakes that I made. And so I'm learning from those and I'm switching things around. And yeah, so be very aware of, and if you have a chance to get feedback from people, then take it because it's so important.
And I just want to celebrate you for being vulnerable and sharing the behind the scenes process because this is the stuff that I want to showcase. We want to know, what are we doing behind the scenes to make this accomplishment, which I know you're going to crush it, but making this stuff happen and to inspire people to just know that yeah, when people put good things out into the world and there is that like yes, maybe luck will be handed your way and there may be an element of that, but there's also really thoughtful work that's happening behind the scenes too. And people should get credit for that. And there's also stuff that's happening in life, right? Of course, you're going through, a really busy time. And I just appreciate you for just making the time to just share your experiences and wisdom because I think it will impact people in so many ways. And hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, but we get to watch you blossom into this next stage of your career. So
And it's really good to also to reflect everything that's happened, because I have done a lot. Sometimes you really do forget that yourself, especially if you're doing something that you love. It's been fun also to reflect and then also try to translate everything into English that I've been doing because it's all been German. I feel so multilingual. So,
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Fawn, for being here, and we will see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Have fun.